What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today we've got our Week 15 fantasy football wide receiver starts and sits for every single matchup, so make sure to tune in. If you enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at alldaypigskin to continue interacting with us there. Let us hear in the comments section. Do you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have? We'll do our best to answer them all. But with that being said, let's get right into it. Before getting into our breakdown, I want to highlight the sponsor of today's video, OddsJam. OddsJam continues to be the place that I use for all of my sports betting research, from the NFL, NBA, MLB, to daily fantasy and everything in between. But don't just take my word for it. Let me show you firsthand all the amazing tools OddsJam has to offer. Starting with their positive EV tool, which identifies situations where a single sportsbook has mispriced their line compared to the rest of the market. They're basically willing to pay a lot more so that you bet with them compared to the other sportsbook. At the end of the day, you're getting the best odds, essentially a mathematical edge and guaranteed money in the long run. But also available is OddsJam's arbitrage tool, which shows situations where the market is so mispriced that you can bet on both sides and guarantee a risk-free return. OddsJam's calculators show you exactly how much you have to bet on the over and under and what the respective guaranteed risk-free return would be. There's also OddsJam's Sportsbook tool, which consolidates all available market info, over 200 sportsbooks, and provides updates in real time and allows you to see line movement. But my personal favorite is their Fantasy Optimizer tool, which is great for those using PrizePicks, Underdogs, or other daily fantasy sites, as you get to see discrepancies between all of these sportsbooks. Imagine, PrizePicks has a Patrick Mahomes line at 200.5 passing yards, and all other books like FanDuel and Underdog have this line at 230 passing yards. Well, getting the over 200.5 on PrizePicks would be an absolute steal. Guess what? OddsJam does that for you. And the good news is, if you sign up today and use our code PIGSKIN, check the link and promo code in the description of this video, you will get 25% off your first month. OddsJam also has a 7-day free trial, so you get to try before you buy. So don't waste any more time and sign up for OddsJam using our code PIGSKIN today. Now, we kick off Week 15 on Thursday with the Chargers at the Raiders. And here, you're going to notice one big name missing from the bunch. That is obviously Keenan Allen, who was declared out for the contest on Thursday. And boy, oh boy, that's a huge hit for all those Keenan Allen owners. But look, I'll be honest with you guys, without Justin Herbert at the helm, the upside for Keenan Allen, and honestly, any other Charger wide receiver, was not going to be anywhere remotely close to what it has been all season long. So with that being said, let's look at some other options if there really are any. So Josh Palmer could technically come off IR here and play in this game. If he does, he is the only wide receiver that I would trust for the Chargers. But again, he, in my opinion, is going to be a boom or bust guy, because I just don't think he's going to see the target share that we would expect if, it was Justin Herbert throwing him the football and there wasn't a Keenan Allen. I think it's going to be the Austin Eckler show. I think it's going to be the Gerald Everett show. And then at wide receiver, some might say, well, this is Palmer's first game back. We don't want to have him immediately at 100% prior to what he was doing before in terms of volume. So there's a lot of different ways to look at it. He's still the only guy that I would trust. Again, he's a boom or bust low-end wide receiver too. Even if he doesn't play, I still wouldn't trust Quinn Johnston or Jalen Guyton, the only really other two wide receivers to know here, because again, to me, in that case, they're just way too unreliable, and even more so than it's Eckler and Everett. For the Raiders, the only guy I'm trusting here is Devontae Adams. I think it's going to be the Josh Jacobs show here, if Josh Jacobs plays, that is. I just don't think right now the quarterback situation for the Raiders is one where you're going to get two great fantasy producing wide receivers. Jacoby Myers, early in the season, say what you will about Jimmy Garoppolo, he was playing better, putting up better numbers. So if there was a better quarterback there, I would say start Jacoby Myers, but just a little bit too hesitant with that, especially with the way I see this thing playing out. So I'd rather take a chance on Devontae Adams. There's not a wide receiver one here as far as fantasy purposes are concerned. So if you're looking for huge upside, Devontae Adams has that, but the risk is also very high. Just quarterback-wise, it's a bad week, folks. So let's move on. Now, speaking of bad quarterback situations, but elite wide receivers, well, can I interest you in the Vikings at the Bengals? The Vikings are on their third-string quarterback. The Bengals don't have Joe Burrow. Yet we have Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase as starts. Jefferson is expected to play. And look, these guys are so elite that you have to start them. That's the situation. I'm sorry. Yes, they might not finish as top 10 wide receivers. They might not finish as top 15 wide receivers. But because of the fact that they can put up 30 points for you, I mean, you have to start him. So both Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. The difference is here, if it were the starting quarterbacks, we'd also have a conversation about Jordan Addison or KJ Osborne for the Vikings or T. Higgins or Tyler Boyd for the Bengals. It's not those starting quarterbacks. It's the backups. They're backups for a reason. So I wouldn't get cute with it here. I'm sitting Jordan. Basically, I'm sitting all the rest of the wide receivers for both of these teams. Then Steelers at the Colts. I don't really love this game as far as fantasy is concerned for the Steelers side of things. Like, I'll start Deontay Johnson just because I think he's going to get a lot of volume. But I can't guarantee it's going to be good volume, knowing who's throwing him the football. So again, he's a boomer bust guy. I'm only really looking at him in PPR formats. George Pickens, I would sit. Again, this fantasy offense ain't going to be super friendly to more than one wide receiver. For the Colts, Michael Pittman, he's the safest guy here, and I would continue to ride him. That's been the case all season long. I think he's a high-end wide receiver too, especially in PPR formats. I would sit Josh Downs here, though. I think it's going to be a lower scoring game, uglier game, so I don't think it's going to be too many passing yards to be had here. I'd rather sit Josh Downs. Moving on, Broncos at the Lions. I'll start Courtland Sutton for Denver. He's the guy that I trust the most. I just think the Broncos offense is so unpredictable. So for that reason, I can't start another wide receiver. Jerry Jeudy is the number 2, but he's been so inconsistent. I mean, he's just been disappointing, bad for the majority of this season. So I'm not going to force him into my lineups, especially when the Broncos sometimes struggle, putting up yardage through the air. Now for the Lions, Amon-Ra St. Brown had a bad week last week, pretty much his first week this entire year where it was kind of disappointing. He's going to bounce back, and I'm going to start him. I think top 10 wide receiver. Don't go chasing the points with Josh Reynolds. He's a sit here. Then Giants at the Saints. Only one name you really got to know, Chris Olave. I think that, look, Derek Carr is going to attempt more passes than we saw last week versus the Panthers. I think Olave is a low-end wide receiver too. You could do better, but you could do a lot worse. And then for the Giants, the Saints defense is a lot stingier than what the Giants faced last week. I am sitting all the New York wide receivers. Moving on, Bears at the Browns. I'm only starting the top guys here for the Bears, DJ Moore. With Justin Fields, it's been a good experience, so let's carry that forward for the Browns. Hopefully the Joe Flacco Express continues. Amari Cooper, if that's the case, I think he's going to see a lot of volume. To me, he would be a mid-level wide receiver too in that case. The other guys here, I just, again, don't trust. There's been a lot of inconsistencies. You never know what's going to happen at the quarterback position. Still somewhat of a question mark, so we're going to pass there. Then Falcons at the Panthers, only one name you really got to know, Drake London. Now, he's not going to break out, I don't think, the way that he did last week, but he's still the best option you have here. The Panthers shouldn't scare you one bit, whether it's defensively or really any place. So Drake London, but that's the main name to know here because otherwise it's going to be a lot of damage on the ground for the Falcons with Bijan, with Algier. So London to me is a mid-level wide receiver too for the Panthers. I'm sitting all the Carolina wide receivers. I'm sorry. I as good as Adam Thielen has proven that he could be early on in the season, Bryce Young is playing awful football. If he struggles getting 100 yards passing, you can't trust any of the wide receivers here. Then Buccaneers at the Packers. I'll start Mike Evans. I'll start Chris Godwin. This Packers defense doesn't scare me. We saw the Giants have success versus them last week, so I think Evans and Chris Godwin will do well. I think Evans will bounce back from his kind of dud performance last week. So I like both these guys as wide receiver twos. Evans has the higher upside. He's the standard play. Godwin is the PPR guy for the Packers. Jaden Reed continue to ride the hot hand, as of late. So I think he's a low-end wide receiver too. Christian Watson, even if he plays, might not be 100%. Romeo Doubs, I think, is like the number 3 option in my opinion. So I'm only looking at one guy here. Again, Packers would love. Don't see too many fantasy relevant guys after the top wide receiver name. Moving on, Jets at the Dolphins. Pretty simple here. I will start Garrett Wilson. Man, imagine if this game was with Aaron Rodgers. The upside would be huge. I could very well see the Jets getting absolutely killed here. But either way, my point is Garrett Wilson is going to get force-fed the football. A lot of targets. Might not be the best quality targets, but there's going to be a lot of targets. So in PPR, I think he's a high-end wide receiver too. For the Dolphins, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. Simple as that. I'm rolling with both of them. Huge upside. Hill, obviously, top 10 wide receiver, top 5 wide receiver. Jalen Waddle, certain weeks can be a top 10 wide receiver as well. Then Chiefs at the Patriots. For the Chiefs, Rashid Rice has pretty much been the only kind of reliable wide receiver for the Chiefs. But again, that's not saying much considering how bad it's been there at the wide receiver position. They definitely need to upgrade that this offseason. But, I think he's a low-end wide receiver too, just because I could see this being an ugly game. For the Patriots, Demario Douglas, if he plays, I would start him. I think he's going to see a lot of targets. If he doesn't, as nasty as this sounds, I think Juju Smith-Schuster is going to get volume. I think that's what it comes down to. I think he's going to get volume. And I think in PPR, he's a low-end wide receiver too. Can get you between 10 and 15 points. Then Texans at the Titans. A lot of factors here. So does CJ Stroud play? Concussion protocol, that's up in the air. That's what a lot of this is riding on here for the Texans side of things. If Stroud plays, then I would start Noah Brown. If Stroud plays and Nico Collins plays, I'd start Nico Collins, obviously. If Stroud doesn't play but Collins plays, I still think that he's the top wide receiver here by far, so I would start him. Just a lot of injury pieces here you got to pay attention to. For the Titans, DeAndre Hopkins, again, you're not starting him because of the talent, you're starting him because of the volume. It's as simple as that. I think he's past his prime, and I wouldn't go chasing the points from last week, or the expectations of those points, I should say, because we've seen him before. In Will Levis's debut, Hopkins went nuclear, and then he went on a cold streak for several weeks. So just because he exploded last week doesn't mean he's going to do the same thing again this week. Moving on, 49ers to the Cardinals, Brendan Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. I would start both of them this week. The Cardinals defense doesn't scare me. I think both can be really solid options, high-end wide receiver twos. For the Cardinals, again, a similar play. Marquise Brown, hopefully he gets the volume. He's got the upside, but he's extremely, extremely volatile. I don't have confidence in him. But if you need a flyer, a guy that could, boom or bust, Marquise Brown would be that. I would imagine the Cardinals have to throw here a bunch, looking for a big play. So Marquise Brown is kind of a name that I'm looking at from that perspective. Then Commanders at the Rams. I'll start Terry McLaurin. I'll start Curtis Samuel for Washington. I'll start Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua for the Rams. Definitely have more faith in the Rams combo. I think both these guys are high-end wide receiver twos. Low-end wide receiver one for one of them. For Washington, I just think it's going to be a game where they have to throw a bunch. And Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, the top two options, in my opinion. Both are, just because some of the inconsistencies Washington has offensively, I think low to mid-level wide receiver twos. Then Cowboys at the Bills. I will start CeeDee Lamb. He's been the most consistent wide receiver for the Cowboys all season long. Especially with the recent emergence of the tight end position for Dallas. It's tough for me to trust Brandon Cooks and Michael Gallup, and then Tony Pollard also being more involved as a pass catcher. So I'm going to start. I'm going to sit both Cooks and Gallup. For the Bills, I'll start Stephon Diggs. Last couple of weeks has been a bit disappointing, but the volume is there, the opportunity is there, the great quarterback is there, so you start him. And then I really do think Gabe Davis could have a little bit of a surprising performance here. For the positive, I think the Bills are going to have to pass a bunch here versus the Cowboys. Look for those big plays. I think Gabe Davis, obviously very boomer bust, but I like the upside this week. Then Ravens at the Jaguars. I'll start Zay Flowers and Odell for the Ravens. If you force me to pick one, I'm going with Zay Flowers. I think he's the more consistent guy, but the Jaguars defense doesn't scare me. So that's the way I'm looking, and Odell has been getting more and more involved these last couple of weeks. So, that's positive. I think either way, though, they're both kind of volatile low-end wide receiver twos for the Jags. Calvin Ridley, the name to know with Christian Kirk out. I wouldn't force a Zay Jones start. This Ravens defense is legit. I think it's Ridley. I think it's Evan Ingram. And then Zay Jones, I think there's a huge talent gap afterwards. So I wouldn't force it here unless you're very, very desperate. Then Eagles at the Seahawks. For Philly, I'm starting A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith. I think it's a good matchup versus the Seahawks defense. Then for Seattle, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. Again, the Eagles defense has kind of been disappointing these last couple of weeks. Metcalf, Lockett, the Seattle Seahawks, I think are going to have to throw a bunch. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the highest scoring game of the week, mainly through the air. So I like Metcalf. I like Lockett. I will, however, sit Jackson Smith and Jigba. I just don't think there will be enough volume here for him. But with that, we wrap up our Week 15 fantasy football wide receiver starts and sits for every single matchup. If you guys enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at alldaypigskin to continue interacting with us there. Let us hear in the comment section, do you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have. We'll do our best to answer them all. But with that being said, we'll see you guys in future videos.